Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, good morning. Um, Welcome to today another lectures today. I would have drank hot water. This thing is cold. It's freezing my throat. Welcome to another lectures today. Um, I promise it's going to be a very long class because uh, it's a long slide I have prepared. But hopefully, we hope that this lecture will not go more than 1 hour 30 minutes, and we hope that wherever you are listening from, you won't be distracted as much. And also, I hope you've been reading your materials because the exams is just by the corner, and I don't want us to be left behind. One thing you must understand that after this lecture, I'll be bombarding everyone with past question and answers. What we need to start tackling in the next couple of months. I mean, before the exam, so that we can be in tune for the exams. So before that comes by, I want us to go over some of the videos and also posts that have been dropped for us, and that is what I want us to do. And enjoying the messages that have been passed through the topics. All right. Today we'll be discussing still on sourcing and procurement. We'll be looking at the topic managing risk and spend in relation to customer and supplier requirements. That is what we'll be dealing with today, and we will ask ourselves, what are the learning outcomes? What are the things that we are supposed to learn as an outcome in today's program and course. End of this program, students should know how to manage risk from potential sources, understand the elements on which a supplier relationship is based, and know how to identify opportunities to manage suppliers, know how to plan and direct negotiations, understand how to control negotiation. All right. So, also, without wasting much time, we'll look at a subtopic called supply risk. Of course, previously, I know we understand what a risk is. Risk are something that can be a problem. Things risk can be something that can affect organization or someone negatively. And of course, risk are things that, when not taken into consideration seriously, can make or mar any organization. So, there are, even as an organization, there are several problems that may negatively affect the overall or their overall objective, especially when it comes to their sourcing and procurement, as we're talking today. So that as you are procurement manager, you must constantly monitor trends within the supply market to proactively, and so that you can find a way to proactively respond to some of the challenges uh, that will affect your organization supply chain. So one way we can use to achieve this is by systematic and structured assessment of the environment, all right, for opportunities and threats. If you look at what we did in chapter 2 of sourcing and procurement, um, we discussed something called pest tool analysis and SWOT analysis. We use this tool to analyze our environment, we call it the environment scanning, where the P in this tool of pest tool is actually called is politics. The E, if you remember, is economic. The S there is social. The T is technology. The the L is legal, and the E is environment. And of course, when you talk about SWOT in analyzing the environment, also is using the concept and acronym stands for SWOT. Is an acronym that stands for strength, weakness, opportunity, and threats. All right, so all these are used to analyze the environment for any form of opportunities or any form of risk or threat that might affect the organization. Of course, and when you talk about supply risk, supply risk or operational risk, these are things that are 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 within the external environment, and some of them are internal environment. Of course, the risk coming from the internal environment are risks that sometimes you can't control the outcome. The impact might be grave, and of course, it's a thing that you can't control when it will occur. Now, but of course, we can conduct research that is aimed to identifying trends relating to technological and economic factors that are likely to be threatened that are likely to threaten procurement objectives. We can also conduct research to identify the degree or level of uncertainty within our supply chain networks. Research can also be conducted to identify opportunities arising from the external environment, all right, and give can give an organization a competitive advantage, all right, and also some social cost saving and enhanced service delivery, uh, provided that the organization kept their eyes and ears open for those opportunities that are coming in for them. Then, when not only that, or not only making research to analyze opportunities and threats. If you look at Lacing and Farrington in 2006, they analyze key areas that must be continuously researched for potential opportunities and threats. All right. So when you're researching as a relation, you look at lesson forecasting rule, researching materials and commodities. All right, to know the trends, their price and do price analysis, including specification and life cycle of those materials you're bringing to your organization. You're researching opportunities into procurement policies and procedures. All right, where there's a need for you to review your current procedure and policies on procurement. You review where there's a need to align your policies. You align them to reflect what the market supply or what the market is saying. All right, and also you can also review policies and procedure based on the current technical development that can overtake the way your procedure and process are worked on, and of course, make it work like that. Of course, you can also research your supply market. All right. Well, of course, when we talk about supply market, you talk about where your supplier gets their goods from. So it is important for a supplier, especially, and also, your supplier to be appraised also. And when you appraise the supplier, it's actually a proactive activity in your overall procurement process. All right. So in addition to your supplier appraiser, you must continue to monitor the performance of how your supplier is performing in order to take appropriate action that is needed in case they are falling short of what is being expected of them. All right. And also, there's a need for you to make a research on your staff roles. All right. There's the role of your staff. There are different duties they do. All right. You need to do a pure analysis of the role, especially when it comes to their ability to minimize risk of within the organization and things like unethical behavior. You will research your staff. You also research your social responsibility. All right, it is very important because it's a very topical issue that can result in high cost to the organization, especially if the organization is caught on the wrong side of the law. So media has to become a very powerful tool in exposing and communicating ethical behaviors of organization these days. Right now, that once NGOs or any organization find out that you are contravening, all right, and they won't give you any excuse, and they will come strongly and hard on you. So buying organization will have to, can receive a bad publicity to the detriment of their reputation because of supplier who have accused or who are accused of being perceived as unethical behavior. Like, for instance, if you're buying from a supplier that have a poor working condition for their employee, of course, it becomes an issue. People would not start boycotting and boycotting your own goods because of what your suppliers do. So there's a need for you to research that area. Of course, when we look at supply risk again, you look at still talking about social responsibility. You look at also the concept of the global environment issues ranging from pollution, waste control, natural resources, and climate change. All right, according to the UK-based Charter Institute of Procurement and Supply, they claim that the stated corporate social responsibility is currently seen by many in procurement as the number one hot topic that has been a major concern in business operation. But the question is, why is it a major concern? There are various reasons for the why, and the various reason, but maybe one may recall some of the organization to have been held accountable for what is happening in their factories in their country, and of course, because of that, it becomes an issue. Of course, we see people bringing issues like that on TV to drag organization that they are suppliers, especially within Bangladesh, to say, okay, Gucci, or I think it was Gucci or one of these top brand that had one of their goods being sourced from a warehouse in Bangladesh or industry factory somewhere in Bangladesh where the building collapsed. And of course, those major organizations who buys from there were called out, and because they were called out, it will affect some people were encouraged to boycott their brand because the brands actually, you know, encouraging their suppliers to treat their staff in a very hostile format or method. Right now, a new cry is also the cry that organizations also are, using children for child labor, especially for countries where they get the lithium industry. All right, and so that one is also another issue that is ongoing right now. Of course, we have we these issues needs to be looked at because it is very important for the organization to ensure that their role is embedded in the ethical sourcing or initiative, because these have become a very important aspect of most organizations, especially in the effort to protect their brand reputation. All right. So there is, apart from those are the areas that organization needs to research to preempt risk and threats and opportunities within their environment. So, of course, we talk about price definition. Let's look at price definition and terminologies. Of course, because price is also a very important uh, tool for organizations to manage their risk and how they spend. All right. So, what is price? Price is the value of a product or service measured by money. Come again. Price is the value of a product or service measured by money. So it is the consideration to be paid or given for an article, goods, service, or something that is desired, offered, and purchased. So it involves costs. It involves the total sum involved. It involves the total sum involved, including the price plus all the associated. All it associated owning or using the product. So in procurement, comparing price enables evaluation and appraisal of relative values offered by different suppliers. So economics view supply and demand as balanced by the influence of price and the point where equilibrium is found is the point where the supply and demand are equal. All right. So if you are buying or you're bringing price into the notion of procurement, a good procurement expert who understand the micro concept of demand and supply. Of course, talking about demand, the quantity of goods that you organization who are buying, who is willing to, the organization who is willing to buy is willing and able to buy at a particular price and given period of time. Of course, supply talks about the willingness of the supplier to supply at a particular time at a price. So, of course, from a rational point of view, realize that if the price of a product is low, the demand for that product might buyers will be willing to buy that product at that very low price. Of course, then of course, giving the same level for a supplier to say if the price of the product is high, the supplier is willing to supply product at that market. The point where in the entire curve or the diagram of issue, the point where the supply and the demand meet at that point is what we call price equilibrium. The price equilibrium is where the demand side and the supplier side are looking at coming into agreement. That is the buyer and the seller having a concrete agreement on how to go about their business. So when we talk about that demand and supply, of course, one thing will come to mind is what we call price elasticity. And what is price elasticity? Price elasticity is actually the degree of responsiveness, all right, to a change in demand or supply, all right, so the change in demand or to a change in the quantity demand, all right, in relationship to the change in price, all right. Like what we're saying is that some price, um, there are some things like when we talk about price, I mean, demand and supply may respond to changes in order for variable like price. It can change, they might respond to substitute goods in the market. Price, demand and supply can respond to availability of goods in the market. They can respond to availability, I mean, test and fashion in the market. So these are sensitive variables, which we will, like we said, we call elasticity. Of course, from the screen, you can see that price elasticity has a formula, and that formula is saying it's percentage change in demand or supply all over percentage change in price. So therefore, slight change in price may cause substantial change in demand. So here, the demand is said to be elastic if there's any change, all right, if there's any change in price that leads to either increase in demand or fall in demand, we can call such product an elastic demand. For example, when you say supplier will consider reducing the price as a lower price that will result to enhanced revenue. Of course, um, it means he will get more people to buy the goods he or she is selling. So generally, given a rational thinking, price, given the agreement of the demand and supply curve, there should be always a degree of response, all right, so a change in price to the change in quantity demanded, all right. For instance, if you have a price in hike from 5 naira to 10 naira, of course, you can get a significant drop in the number of people who are willing to demand for the product because one of the factors that will affect demand will include the price of the product itself, the money available in the pocket of the buyer, all right, the disposable income in the house of the buyer, and other things like, the substitute goods, taste and fashion, seasonality, availability of the goods will affect that demand. Of course, when we have if suddenly we have a change in price and it does not affect the quantity demanded it does not affect the quantity demanded or the volume of quantity demanded still remain the same or in fact all increase, we can call such a goods or such a demand an inelastic demand because it does not respond to uh, the change in price is not responsive to the change to the quantity demanded. So these are some of the things we must understand when we deal with pricing. We must respect that the concept of price elasticity must come in. All right, so we'll talk about pricing elasticity. Now, pricing elastic will happen where we have fewer substitute goods or competitor. All right, it will happen where buyers are slow to change their buying habits and practices and do not search for alternative method because of the price has been hiked or there's no substitute goods in the market. So they are just committed and are bound to buy what is being given to them. And of course, price elastic will also happen where buyers do not challenge high prices. They take it as it comes. So the theory of elasticity of demand applies in terms of what we call a perfect competition for it to exist. Of course, for it to exist, there are 5 conditions that must apply according to Listen and Farrington, and the condition will include they include the fact that the market, you're working in a perfect competition market, all right, and of course everything is fairly perfect. And when we talk about perfect competition, we're talking about having a perfect example of a perfect market, a market that you talk about. You have many buyers, you have many sellers. The buyers are what? Homogeneous. You have heterogeneous. We have everything there in just, many buyers, you have many sellers, you have different substitute goods, you have everything working in that perfect market. But of course, we have imperfect markets, like we talk about. Imperfect market might look like monopolistic market, where you have only one supplier of that product, or like e.g. the Nigerian petroleum industry, oligopoly, you have fewer supplier of that product, monopolistic competition, you have competition between supplier, but they're main between different suppliers. So these are examples of what we call imperfect market. All right, where you can actually get price and elasticity. Then from there, we look at pricing strategy. Of course, we see what is price, and we see how we can determine price using price elasticity. Of course, negotiation of price is an important aspect in purchasing and has been covered in our previous section in chapter 2. So, in terms of the supplier and the buyer, then the following are the consideration on pricing. It should be clear again that in some aspect of negotiation, it is not encouraged, especially during and after a public tender has been received. Buyers and procurement manager must adhere to policies and procedure governing in the organization or countries when it comes to pricing and negotiation. Of course, in pricing strategy, the supplier will consider the following. All right. Now, the supplier will consider that the market position occupied, ranging from monopoly position, with seller setting the price, all right, subject to what we call legitimate control. Then, two, the nature of demand, either elastic or inelastic. Uh, what the buyers will pay, charging what the market will bear, then competition pricing, then supplier need for the business. So all this would be a pricing strategy a supplier will consider before bringing the product to the market. Then I want you to talk about the supplier. Okay, now the supplier also will also consider passive long-term value of what they are supplying. All right. They also consider supply of standard. There's the commodity of product and specialized product that goes into the market. They also consider production life cycle or stages. For example, if the product is declining or if it's declining, of course, they want to put a discount. If it's growing, they want to put a strong promotion on that product. Then, of course, they want to look at order volume in their pricing strategy. They're looking at also cost plus pricing. All right, when we talk about cost production plus margin for profit, they are trying to look at pricing for market penetration proposed by pricing low to win at a larger share. This in turn becomes what your supplier will want to consider in pricing. So in turn, what do you think? In turn, what will potential when they are buying? The buyers will also consider the risk attached to purchase and the method of pricing from the firm price to cost pricing. The buyer will actually prefer the position in the market, for example, a monopoly supplier, the number of suppliers in the market, and possibility to source from another supplier. They want the price paid by other buyers. They want the relationship of the price with value. They want payment terms. They'll consider price analysis to determine what is reasonable and also consistency in order volume. Right? They'll consider that one. All the above factors we've mentioned will influence the final decision in practice and agreement between either the seller and the buyer. And of course, where the two agree, all right, they can decide to use what is preferable as their best form of pricing. Of course, either they want to use a firm pricing agreement or what we call a cost price agreement. Of course, when we talk about the cost price agreement, it is more advantageous perhaps to the buyers for the following reason: using the cost price, a cost price agreement. One of the reasons is that the supplier bear the risk, all right, and any changes that comes with it. Meanwhile, the buyer knows that what is to be paid. This is what I'm supposed to pay. Any risk associated with you bringing it to my premises, that is your own cup of tea, not my own. And of course, another advantage to the buyer is that the supplier have a maximum incentive to produce efficiently and on time, and the supplier will pay for all cost increase, but will keep all cost savings. So, and of course, another advantage to the buyer is that a minimum administration is needed where you're using the cost price agreements. All right, instead of using a firm price agreement. Then with the cost price agreement, the supplier also adds a fixed percentage with the cost for the profit, and the buyer pays for all the costs. And this sorry, the what I explained the first time, which is being the former, it's the explanation for a firm agreement, because agreement is fixed. But for the cost price, of course, it costs a variable. This is the cost, whatever we accrue on in doing this business, then there's the percentage of profit that you pay us. That is a flexible one. Of course, it will favor the buyer, but it will not favor the supplier. But of course, the cost price agreement will always favor the supplier because, as it stands, the advantage it has to the supplier is that buyers will bear the financial risk. Sellers have to no incentive to be more efficient or effective as their costs are being paid anyway. Administration can be difficult as buyers need to have appropriate knowledge of sellers processing the practice and cost structure. So cost plus agreement, however, very common in the supply of service such as distribution. And here the purchaser who recently outsourced the service will still have in-house knowledge on all this cost structure. Of course, knowledge will need to be updated over time. Of course, when you have the cost plus agreement, it means you are giving the buyer every information needed. What I'm saying is like more like a JV, it's an open JV, like an open book. Whatever is incurred in making that business work will be told to the buyer, and the buyer will understand it and understand this is what I'm paying for this service to get to my premises. Okay, unlike the firm agreement, whatever is firm is said is sealed and in concrete, or whatever costs that come into it, it's the supplier that bears the entire cost. So we look at price analysis, variation, and value. Let's look at the subtopic. Now, lesson and firstly determine price analysis as the breaking down of a quoted price into a constituent element for the purpose of determining the reasonableness or otherwise of a proposed charge. Now, the cost, knowledge, and information the buyer needs will come from the past experience, from the internal costing estimate from the supplier provides a cost information. Additionally, other management accounting practice such as life cycle costing, target costing, we look at. Well, I think we did this in supply chain management as a cost. So I helpful. No purchasing manager will be effective without knowledge of costing. So for those students who need such knowledge, there are several textbooks and authors who will provide overview of what we call the life cycle costing, target costing, activity costing, and standard costing and budgeting. Even though I know we did that in supply chain management activity, you can actually go to that way to pay more attention on how all this costing affect your supply chain. So it is important to do this price analysis and value analysis. And the variation and value. So meanwhile, advantage of conducting the price analysis as well as listening and fighting are as follow. That's one, price analysis give guidance on what to say, highlight supplier price mistake, provide basis for negotiation. Also, price can vary at different times due to reasons for quality. For example, use of brand name for, from non-brand name, quantity, for example, incentive on in placing larger orders, time, for example, in buying quiet product, cost, for example, early payment incentive, and of course, place, for example, changing to X work terms of import purchase. So these can tell us these are different examples where price can vary at different time due to different reasons based on quality, based on quantity, based on time, based on place, using uh, the five rights. All right. Of course, the advantage of content price analysis, let's not forget that it gives guidance of what to pay, it gives highlight of supplier pricing mistakes, and provide basis for negotiation. Of course, we look at price and value. All right, price and value are not the same. All right, with value often being viewed as what comes over, all right, the whole life of a product or service. Alternatively, value is often seen as being what the customer perceives to be and something they are proposed and willing to pay for. So value analysis is often carried out as team projects with input from users. So research and development, purchasing, warehousing, production, distribution, and finance. As part of team purchasing, we collect data or collate data on product and materials from the marketplace. So for you to understand the value of a product and analyze value of the product, there's a need for a concrete information. All right, and not just information, a good information flow. So an important aspect of risk assessment involves collection of analysis of accurate and timely data. All right, so as procurement staff, we should understand that good decisions are made from information that comes from reputable source, and our role is to ensure that the right information from the right format is made available in the right time scale. All right. So what some of these sources um, we can rely on are quite a quest to assess and to minimize a risk in our supply. All right. So still talking about price value. So analyze risk using information. We can rely on data like primary data. Here we go out to obtain our own data through data collection and surveys and questionnaires and also observations and internal records. Two, you have secondary data, which are statistics that are produced by other dependable sources, but like government statistics or depend like Nigerian Bureau of Statistics. Of course, three, you have government sources, where most countries that have good, who don't joke with data, have department that have mechanism to monitor national trends for potential developmental purpose. So you go to a particular government office or to get data you need concerning, let's say, Nigerian Port Authority or NIMASA, Nigerian Maritime Authority or Federal Port Authority to get specific data from those sources on different cargoes or inputs that are coming in. Also, you get data from also information from non-governmental organizations who have, I mean, the reputation of giving good source because of their ethical and environmental stance. You can get information from them. You can also get information from the media. All right. Um, Media like Business Day, Financial Times, and the rest to get an overview of what the economy is like. You can get information from professional organization. All right, like the Charter Institute of Lake and Transport, based on maybe they've done some strong, substantial data-based work on market intelligence and tracking code on how things are working within the country. So you can get country where you can get information from them. All right. Remember, we're talking about managing risk and spend, of course. And one way of managing risk is one thing we'll look at is using the law. All right, the law and the law of what we're talking about, law of contracts. So right now we're looking at legal issues on contract and disputes. Of course, you need to understand this and know how to use it to manage considerably um, relationship with your supplier, and in case problem comes on board, you can actually use it to actually resolve dispute within yourself. All right. So an important aspect of risk management is a top understanding of legal environment within the supply chain and operation. So failure to comply can result to high cost to um, organizations. So including delays in supply essentials supplies into the production or to the end of the customer. So the details on legal system are based on the laws available within the country, like the Nigerian legal system, but the underlying principle are generally, for international trade. So it is should be noted, however, that each country will have its own legal system, which must be complied, or I mean, complied and compile. I mean, meets the laws. So, listening and writing covers the legal aspect of purchasing, which includes the essential of contract and law, and buyers should be studied. Now, you should also have already read lesson. I mean, of course, that's an assignment. You can actually go back and read the lesson writing, read writing on competition legislation. But of course, they wrote something regarding the legal aspect of what we call procurement or supply chain or purchasing. And this form today will stamp the essential of contract law. And some of these are like this: the law that takes us to a sort of we call the law of contract and legal principle. Now, whatever we'll be saying right now on this note will be based on English law, which the Nigerian legal system is founded on, and the law are derived from four main sources. Generally, in any environment, we have what we call the common law, we have the equity law, we have the status law, we have maybe giving what we have in Nigeria, the ECOWAS community law, since we have the ECOWAS community court where people can be dragged to for trade dispute or whatever. So the common law, like it stands, is very central to English law. It's a body of law decision on cases hard and customs of variation court of the land. So equity, on the other hand, form a law derived from a result of cases decided in the court, and the common law and equity differ from status law in that the status law is laid down by Parliament and in form of, published act of Parliament that has been signed to law by the President of the country. That becomes the status law. Then, of course, um, common law provides us with the following definition of contract, giving precedents that are set in law common sense. It defines contract as an agreement between two or more parties which is intended to be enforced by the law. Now, I come again, a contract is an agreement between two or more parties which is intended to be enforced by the law. To make an enforceable contract, there are three essentials that must be present and correct within the contract. The when you are making a contract, all right, there must be a capacity, the power or authority to act. There must be intention to create legal relation between both parties. There must be an agreement. An agreement arises from offer being accepted without condition. Otherwise, it becomes a counter offer that requires acceptance. All right. It also like when we talk about say looking at the essentials of element of an enforceable contract, we look at agreements. All right. Agreement, this is formed when one party has accepted the other party offer. Consideration, the agreement is part of a bargain which each side must promise to do or give something to the other. Intention, the party or parties must intend the agreement to have legal consequence. Form, in case certain formalities, maybe in writing, needs to be observed. Um, the informalities must be in written format. There must be a capacity. The parties must be legally capable of entering into a contract. There must be genuineness. The agreement has to be entered into freely and must involve a meeting of minds. So legality must be present, must be valid, must be essential in a contract. That is, the purpose of agreement must not be illegal or contrary to any public policy or law. These are essential elements for an enforceable contract within uh, the procurement ambit. Then we look into each of them one after the other. We talk about capacity. Capacities means that both parties must have the legal authority and ability to enter into a contract. In simple terms, the party should usually be 18 and above, and they must be of sound mind. If one of them or one of the person entering into the contract does not have necessary power to contract, maybe it will be void or unenforceable or voidable. That is, innocent party has the option to set the contract aside and carry out the remedy to account for. Also, there are certain groups who do not have capacity and so cannot enter into the contract. One, minor does not have capacity, all right, except there's an exception in the case of any law of the country. Those with mental disorder does not have the capacity to enter into any contract. And also, three, those under the influence of alcohol or drugs should not enter into a contract. And then corporation, which requires agent or form of contract on their behalf. Some other areas where you have minor coming in but most legal, it means an elderly person will enter the contract on the behalf. So this becomes an essential, for a value, for a capacity to enter into a contract. So now we talk about intention. Intention in a contract to create a legal relation. It means both parties must intend that their relationship will have um, um, that their relationship will have a legal effect. This is taken for granted in some commercial and business transactions, but not a social domestic arrangement. However, if a social or domestic arrangement may be contractually binding if both parties have made it clear, expressly or by conduct, that such is their intention to create a legal relationship and must be binding, even though most commercial businesses will not allow me want to agree to that. Of course, the next part of an essential contract we just spoke of is agreement. All right, this arises when an offer and acceptance of offer is taken. So then, after you've taken there's an offer. There's the next thing is there's an acceptance. Then after there's an acceptance in the commercial world, you pay, and after payment, I think the next thing is give me something for my service. All right, it becomes one thing that must be looked at. Then when you look at agreement improper, an offer once made does not remain open forever. And sometimes it may be terminated in various ways and may therefore be withdrawn by the offeror unless it is already been accepted. However, withdrawal is not effective until communication is communicated to the offering. When I mean the offerer, somebody who's offering the contract, and for somebody who's receiving the offer. All right, and also offers can also be rejected by somebody who's accepting the offer, the offering. Then, of course, agreement can also be terminated if it lapses or last if your free fails to accept it within the reasonable time that okay this offer lasts. I mean this offer stands valid until the next 24 hours. If the next 24 hours the person you're giving that offer to do not accept it, then of course it will not stand. Of course, another thing that terminate agreement or make agreement valid is death. Death of either the offerer or the offer terminate what has been offered within a valid contract. All right. So acceptance must be one. Once acceptance is reaching upon an agreement, it must be communicated to the person making the offer, either directly or through a reliable third party. Acceptance is only effective when received by the offeror, not when dispatched by the offeree. This may be much, much earlier than the contract only exists for this time. So not because you must get if I mean once you say it, of course you must get the feedback from the person you're sending giving the offer to say, look, okay, I accept or I do not accept. So the battle of the form occurs in the situation of offer and counter offer. So it describes a common situation where a seller and a buyer each trying to deal on their own standard contractual terms and conditions, where there's a discrepancy between the condition and offer and those accepted. It may not be clear whether the buyer or the seller terms and condition apply. So I'm making an offer, then somebody you're offering to say, look, let me give a counter offer. And of course, you hear it, there's what we call the battle of the forms coming until remember agreement is not reached until both parties agree to the terms and condition of what is to be stipulated. So when you consider consideration in the bargain or exchange or aspect of agreement, it is a promise on one part for an act on the other, or can be a promise for a promise. All right, either way, quid pro quo. Without consideration, there is usually no contract, and there are unlimited exceptions to these rules. So there are certain rules applying to consideration. Now, consideration must be valuable, but needs not to be adequate. This means that what is offered by one party to the contract must have a monetary value, but the value needs to be equal to what is being offered by the other party. So in such case, one party will have to go bad bargain, but the court do not concern themselves with that, provided the consideration has some monetary value. However, small, it's sufficient to make a contract valid. So consideration must not be passed. In other words, you cannot force someone to do something for you on the strength of something you did for him in the past. All right. So that is one thing you must understand. Uh, Also, consideration must be given by both parties. In commercial contract, consideration is normally money, but it needs not to be. For example, some contracts are on the basis of barter. Give me this, I give you this. So a framework agreement with no specific commitment is not a contract. I come again. A framework agreement with no specific commitment is not a contract because there's no consideration. So consideration is sometimes injected by making a nominal payment. Then from there we go to what we call what we call privity of contract. And the doctrine of privity means that a contract cannot, as a general rule, confer rights or impose obligation arising under it on any person except the parties to it. So common laws has reasoned that only a promisee may enforce the promise, meaning that now he person will make promise suppose enforce the promise we make, meaning again that if the third party is not promised, then they are not privity to the contract. So therefore, only a person who is a party to a contract can sue on it. Because you hear there or you did there, you are not a party to it. You can't sue if uh, the contract is not going as it should be. So if the doctrine of privity was inflexibly applied, it would cause consideration, injustice, and inconvenience according to many exceptions to it, having been developed to the main ones being as follow. Collateral contract, a contract between two parties may be accompanied by a collateral contract between one of them and the third person relating the same subject matter. So there must be, however, be an intention to create a collateral contract before the contract can be formed. There's also the concept of agency. The concept of agency is an exception to the doctrine of privity, in that an agent may contract on behalf of his principal with a third party and a form in binding contract between the principal and the third party. Then, of course, the concept of what we call a status. Certain exception to doctrine of privity have been created by statutes, including price maintenance and agreement, and certain contracts in terms of insurance enforceable in favor of third party. If you look at the example of the UK under the Road Traffic Act of 1972, an injured party may recover compensation from an insurance company once he or she has been obtained judgment against the insured person. So we can have these um, these issues coming up to negate the concept of privity of a contract. And if you realize again, I said a privity of a contract is the doctrine of privity means that the contract cannot, as a general rule, confer right to impose obligation arising it to any person except the parties to it. So it means, this what I just pointed out as scenarios where privity can be ignored, and of course, and um, third party can come into the contract. So it is the responsibility of the buyer to ensure a company is protected legally, all right, and everywhere that the company is protected, all right, and that becomes a legal terms for protection means civet emptor, which means let buyer beware. Being a rule in most businesses, civet emptor, buyers beware. That this is not what we offer, this is what we offer, or this is not our service. All right. The model form of contract will allow for basic terms and conditions to form the main frame of all company contract, with specific clauses being added according to the nature of the product or service being purchased. So unless made explicit through specific um, express terms in agreement, the 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 terms were implied according to a logical legislation that has been developed to deal with commercial disputes in the business environment. So condition and warranties will form basis of terms, accentuating the importance of attached to each of the obligation which forms the agreement. So clauses can be used to secure against risk, but also a bargaining tool. The buyers can agree the inclusion of or deletion of clauses for small concession. So there's always the concept of adding the contractual terms and conditions. So the terms and conditions say for instance or of contract do set out the obligation and liabilities of parties. So there are statement of risk, the key risk areas to be dealt with when it comes to sales are as follow: price, payment, defect, completion and delays, standard and care, and workmanship liabilities, and also indemnities need to be looked at when it comes to terms and conditions for sales of contract. All right, that needs to be set out by both parties, showing the obligations and much more. Uh, then where a contract has all these requirements, then it is said to be valid. Now, if one party does not live up to the promises, then the other party may sue for breach, what we call breach of contract. So meanwhile, if essential elements are arising, then the contract will be voidable, or unenforceable. So void means that the whole contract is null. That is, no time as the contract exists when the contract has been voided by a law court. Voidable covers contract founded on misrepresentation and some agreement made by minors. So the contract may operate as valid contract unless and until one of the parties take a step to avoid it. All right, then unenforceable means It's a valid contract, but it cannot be enforced in court as one party refuses to carry out its own terms and conditions. Now, let's look at specific clauses that we in contract terms and conditions. There are many specific clauses that may form part of the contract, and these can include one, addresses. Communication will be sent to the address stated. Arbitration, how disputes will be settled. Assignment, controlling who the work is contracted to. Then we have what called default for non-delivery or non-performance of the contract. Now, of course, we have entirety, which is entity which is not in the contract, does not exist. Then force majeure, mitigating event out of your control. Law, deciding which country's law is used for a current contract. Liability and indemnity, protecting against the risk of consequential or indirect loss. Then you have notice, which means communication will be used to pass information across parties involved. Then also causes like payment, when our payment is made, subcontracting, restriction on subcontracting, unenforceable, protecting the old contract from individual terms which cannot be enforced. There were also clauses like variation, how variation to the contract are to be approved. And also the terms on which the contract is concluded may include more than one, more than just the terms expressly laid out in the contract. So, for example, additional terms can be implied. Of course, like additional. We talk about we say in terms on which the contract is concluded may include more than just one term, especially laid out in the contract. For example, additional term can imply that by fact and implication that the obvious for both parties, by statute, legislation, by court which precedent set in case, by custom, for example, the trade acceptance that one case or product contain 1 dozen items. This becomes an example where you have you can actually have some where either clauses can be infused into a contract or can be removed if it is being passed through a competent law or by fact that one of you or one of both parties do not understand what is being done. So So these are some of the things that can be included. Of course, somebody can cite a precedent of the case, a law case, and say, okay, based on this, on that, we will go on to say, look, this is not enforceable, this is enforceable, or this should be added within the contract. And of course, we're doing law here. This is a full law course if you go to the Nigerian Law School under corporate law and commercial law. Of course, we'll talk about discharge of contract. Discharge of contract means either to end a contract, all right, or to stop a contract. So a contract may be discharged by performance agreement, all right, can be discharged by performance, means the agreement start, it finish well, we end our contract there. By agreement, okay, this thing is not working for both of us. We can agree to say, look, let's stop it here. By breach, of course, one of the parties breach the contract or going against the clause of the contract or trying to frustrate the contract. Then when we talk about discharge by performance, you're actually saying that the general rule is that the parties must perform precisely in terms of contract in order to discharge the obligation, of course, as with the law. And these are some of the expectations as follow that divisible contracts. A contract may be entirely divisible, and the entire contract is one where the agreement provides that the complete performance by one party is the condition precedent for a contractual liability on the part of the other party. So with a divisible contract, part of the consideration of one party is set off against the part of the performance of the other. So we can also have acceptance of partial performance, where the party to whom the promise of performance was made receives the benefit of partial performance and it accepts the work, then the promise is obligated to pay a reasonable price for the benefit he has received. So completion of performance prevented by promise, where the party to enter the party where the party to an entire contract is prevented by the promise of performing and all its obligation, then it can recover a reasonable price for what and has been performed. All right. So this is an example of performance. Obviously, the general rule is that parties must perform precisely all to the terms of contract in order to discharge their obligation. Of course, as with law, there are some exceptions. Exception of divisible contract could be one example. Acceptance of partial performance and completion of performance prevented by the promisee could be example of how you can end. I mean, not necessarily performing the contract to the end, but it can end by performance based on these three source. Then, of course, also not just by substantial performance, but we'll talk about we talk about substantial performance also, and also tender performance. Substantial performance talks about when a party fully performs the contract, but subject to such minor defect that it can be said to have a substantial perform. He has substantially performed as he has promised. It can be regarded as far more just to allow to recover a contract price reduced. So by the extent into which it breached the contract, it lessened the value of what was done than to leave it with no right of recovery at all. Then the tender performance is equivalent to performance in the situation where party one cannot complete the performance without the assistance of party two, and party one makes an offer to perform which party two refuses. So those are tender performance. You go like, you guys are slowing me, but I'll go ahead and do it. At the end of the day, we can have the exception to full performance of a contract. Then, of course, agreements, all right. We can discharge a contract through agreement. The general rule is that what has been created by agreement may be extinguished by agreement. So, an agreement by parties to an existing contract to extinguish a right and obligation that have been created is a self-binding contract. So, provided that it is made under a seal and supported by the consideration, where the agreement for discharge is not under seal, and the legal position varies under whether the discharge is bilateral, unilateral. Yeah, the different rules will apply. In terms of discharge of contract, there were breach of contract. Here, a failure to perform the terms of contract constitutes a breach. So a breach which is serious. I mean, it's serious enough to give its innocent party the option of treating the contract as discharge, and can occur in one or two ways. Either one party may show by express of words or by implication from their conduct at some time before performance is due, and they do not intend to observe the obligation under the contract, or they may in fact break a condition or otherwise break the contract in such a way that it amounts to a substantial failure of consideration. These are methods we can actually look at to discharge a contract or end a contract. Also, frustration. The doctrine of frustration operates in situations where it is established that due to something subsequent change in circumstance, the contract is rendered impossible to perform, or it has become deprived of its commercial purpose by the event, not due to the act of default of either both parties. Also, example of frustration are destruction of specific object essential for performance for the contract, personal incapacity, non-occurrence of specific event, interference by government, and if the contract later becomes illegal and delay, inordinate and unaccepted delay may frustrate the contract, and the problem is to know how long the party must wait before the delay can be said to be what frustrating. All right. From that way, we can actually discharge a contract. Then, of course, when we look at contract and the legal issues of it, we must talk about intellectual property rights of both parties. So, when product or service are purchased, the supplier has a certain right under the law on creativity and innovation in the same way as if they own the physical property. So the owner of the intellectual property can therefore control and be rewarded for the use of that, which this will encourage further innovation and creativity for the benefit of all. So because I'm selling it for you and that's my brand, sometimes and you're using it, you will pay for my intellectual property right. So in some cases, intellectual property give rise to protection for ideas, but in other areas, there will need to be more elaboration of the ideas before protection can arise. So it will often not be possible to gain intellectual property rights unless they have been granted. But however, intellectual property rights such as copyright arises automatically without any registration. Like this is my intellectual property. So in the contract, you must include with that as you're using it, you will pay me my money. And the main type of IPR as follow. We have patent cover invention. We have trademarks for brand identity of goods and service, as to allow differentiation between different traders. We have design for product appearance that covers the whole part of the product, resulting from features like lines, contours, colors, shapes. You understand, texture, materials of the product served. Then we have what we call copyright for materials such as IT, artistic music, film, sound recording, and broadcast, including software and multimedia. These are copyright material that will come in, and sometimes you want to include that into your contract and to know if you'll be paid or not, and less. Of course, look at loss and dispute. There is no clear definition of the direct loss, but this is due to the fact that when court consider damages, they will consider each case upon its own facts. So when parties have agreed between themselves in contract, and the circumstance of breach will inform the court when it decides to award damages. However, it does not necessarily follow that when consequential loss is excluded, economic loss or loss of profit cannot be recovered. It can be recovered uh, in a court of law. So, dispute and resolution. How do we settle our dispute? How do we resolve it? So clearly, where this cannot be settled, then court of law becomes involved at cost of delay and reputation, because the court process takes time. Alternatively, for a commercial case, there is what we call alternative dispute resolution (ADR). In contrast to litigation and arbitration, it provides opportunity for, even when direct negotiation have failed, for parties to control the outcome of their dispute. So alternative dispute resolution is actually a collective term for the ways that parties can settle their civil dispute with the help of an independent third party without the need of a formal court hearing. So the term is originated in America in an adversarial, costly, unpredicted, rigid, too professional, damaging to relationship, and limited to narrow right-based remedies compared to creative problem solving. So the acceptance of ADR, alternative dispute resolution, grew as the preferred terms in business and civil litigation world, as its popularity is based on the following fact: quicker than litigation, relatively cheaper, and can help to resolve disputes without damaging commercial relationship, because it is based on gentleman agreement. So mediation is also useful. Uh, is also used for successful to resolve conflict. Dispute. A wide range of disputes, whether or not they involve money, including cases involving problem with maybe child residence and contact neighbors and land disputes, clinical negligence and personal injury cases, as well as in business commercial areas. Mediation gives a party or both parties in dispute the opportunity to reach a settlement without a court hearing, or with the help of the independent third party mediator. So mediation is flexible process with experience, uh, with an experienced mediator that can exploit the flexibility, essentially following the framework provides a safe foundation on which to build. So one can use a chartered mediator or a trusted mediator to come in. So when you're using mediation, the primary contact between parties and the mediator, um, to agree on. With mediator, with the parties involved, we agree with the mediator to agree on the mediation, to come and agree with them, agree terms of mediation, including dates, duration, location, representation, legal framework, cost and documentation of the media, of everything, limited brief written summaries of case that's submitted by parties in advance. Then also the call to inform the mediator, focus on parties on the real issues to deal with in their mediation, and what they need to do. And of course, they'll have also what called a joint meeting, and the mediator clarifies the position and establishes ground of rules for both parties. The parties present a summary of their case to each other. The issue is clarified. You have a private and confidential meeting called caucuses between mediator and each party separately, um, to examine the important issues that needs to have party each for each party, and encourage openness about weakness and well as strength. Then also discuss options for settlement in the concept of what we call mediation. Then you have joint meetings as appropriate throughout the mediation, at which parties may negotiate directly and discuss differences, particularly in understanding the fact or expert opinion or likely legal outcome. Then also the also set up meeting to set settlement down in writing and agree for further actions. So mediation, um, you should know, is voluntary, is non-binding, it's actually involve private disputes. Then also it's also is a private dispute resolution process which is neutral, which a neutral person helps the parties and tries reach a negotiated settlement. So the mediator brings negotiating. Mediator brings negotiating, problem solving, and communication skill to the process. Um, process from the position of his own independence and neutrality, making the progress possible where direct negotiation may have stalled. That is where you see all this. That's what they will bring in the mediator. So during mediation process, the mediator fulfills several important roles. Is a manager, is a facilitator. All right, he serves as an information gatherer, absorbing and organizing data and identifying common grounds and shared goals, zones of agreement. Why the mediation goes on, is a reality tester, helping parties to take private and realistic view of the dispute. Is a problem solver by bringing clear head and creative mind to help the parties construct an outcome and that the best meet their needed they are when they compare with alternative of non-agreement. Is a sponge. The mediator is a sponge which soak up the parties' feelings and frustration and help them uh, channel their energies to positive approaches to the issues. Also, the mediator is a scribe who writes or assists in writing the agreement and checking all issues that are covered within the terms and conditions of the agreement. All right. Um, is a settlement supervisor. The mediator is a settlement promoter. Prompter. All right. And also the essence of mediation and the reason for its success is that it introduces a powerful structure and dynamic into any negotiating or dispute during discussion. So the mediator acts as a catalyst, being an independent, neutral, who is committed to helping parties to settle, but who does not have a stake in the dispute, either as a party or an advocate or a representative. So that's for that. So a less well, other less well-known ADR method will include a neutral evaluation, where a neutral third party provides a non-binding assessment of the merit of the case. You can have also a conciliation, which is similar to mediation, but the third party conciliator takes more intervention in the role. You can have what we call expert determination, where an independent expert is used to decide the issue, and also a neutral fact finding is used in case of involving the complex technical issues, where neutral experts investigate the facts of the case and produce a non-binding evaluation of the merit. There, of course, we have what we call mediation arbitrators. A mixture of mediation and arbitrator is also where parties agree to mediate, but refer a dispute and arbitration. But refer to dispute and arbitration if the mediation is unsuccessful. You can have that one to go and settle your dispute. So, of course, how do we implement contracts? It is essential in implementation of contract that uh, all parties involved are aware of their roles and responsibility. The supplier must be conscious of their responsibility regarding the delivery of the product or services in line with contractual obligations. The purchaser must ensure that the contract is managed in accordance with the company policy, and customer is kept aware of any of this development. So others, let's look at others contract and supply agreements. So in contractual agreement, most structured, contractual agreement must be structured to match a particular requirement, and the requirements vary. And this section will look at this. Will therefore present the overview of what we call our purchasing practice. Example of different types of arrangement are as follow in terms of implementing contracts. If you are buying, we have what we call spot order purchase, one of purchase order, supplier or framework agreement, fixed price contract, contract with rate. These have these may have been set up through a binding process by competitive tendering or by negotiation. So contract award after somebody you've submitted tender, you've successfully selected the best tender among the tender submitted, you have a negotiation. Then I think the best thing is to award a contract award following the tendering or negotiation process, which we talked about in chapter 2. The contract can formally be awarded, and this eventually the contract that the result to from the tendering process comprised of a general inquiry document, selected tender, and any subsequent relevant correspondence between the tenderer, somebody who's tendering the tender, and the purchaser, particularly arising from the tender assessment, e.g., questionnaire, and post tender negotiation, then the letter of contract award. All these documents uh, will be put together before the award of contract, and also if need be, so they can be used to, remind the tenderer and the winner of the bid that this is what was agreed and this is what we should follow on. Of course, for simpler contract, the contract generally comprises of a contract letter that refers to the inquiry, tender, and questionnaire, including any other relevant correspondence or minutes. So for some very large contract, procurement staff might produce a contract document comprising a comprehensive considered version of all agreed provisions of the inquiry, bid, and the questionnaire, and this represents the total and final agreement between the parties. So if any post-tender negotiation have led to significant changes to the original bid submitted, the contractor might be asked to submit a revised tender incorporating all agreed changes. And the letter of contract award must set out clearly the basis of contract and and stipulates any condition precedent to the award. That is, any condition with which the tender must comply before contract is regarded as firm. All right. And with this, we come to the end of this course and say thank you for listening. Though it's a 1 hour, 11-minute course, the course that is long and lengthy if you look at your course material. But of course, it's comprised of everything you need to know about commercial law and corporate law, and that you must understand why you are making your procurement and your buyings. So we review them. These are things, they are topical points that you can review, silent points you need to understand by contract, and it will come up in your exams. Please go back and review some of all these things we've learned. And I will say thank you, and we hope that when we meet, uh, would have gone past where we are right now, and would have gone done our question review, and of course, uh, don't forget and feel to send uh, questions to me. You can call my phone, you can send them via WhatsApp, you can send me a message. I am ready to answer your questions. Um, and whatever query you want to bring regarding some of the courses we've learned. And this is a practical course, like I said. Contract, procurement, and contracting is one course that is selling today. You're lucky enough to be doing it as a core course within the supply chain, the international diploma program. I saw somewhere where you put law of government, procurement, and contracting, and the cost for that program is about, I think, 8,500 to $1,000 thereabout to be done online. But you're doing it for less than something here because you paid for it. Um, so please go back and review all we've been taught. Remember, we're talking about managing risk and spend. We discussed risk and risk management and how you can analyze your environment using best tool and SWOT analysis to define, to get opportunities and threats coming to your organization. And also we move from there, we understand what we call price analysis. All right, price analysis can help us to manage the risk and spending, where we talk about price, demand and supply, and price elasticity. We looked at one variable thing we need to look at, which are the law of contracting, that will also enable us to manage our contract effectively, or um, come up with contracts that can prevent us from every form of risk, and also what code should be in the contract, what is considered a contract, what are the core essentials of a contract agreement, considerations, capacity and capability to enter into a contract, and all that. We've discussed it, and of course, what is an enforceable contract? How do you discharge a contract or stop a contract? What I will stop is set up by performance, and there are places where performance can actually be voided. Of course, we talked about by frustration, by breach of contract, you can actually discharge a contract. I'll look at dispute resolution. I've talked about instead of going to court, that will take time, but there are different methods which is the alternative ADR, alternative dispute resolution method, and one is way is using either an arbitration or you're using a mediator to actually mediate within your organization. Or of course, we look lastly how you can actually award a contract and what will form while you are reading your contract. And of course, while you have done that, of course, there's one thing we need to even look at in this course, which is your uh, supplier relationship management, why the contract is working and what it needs to be looked at, and monitoring the process of the contract with your supplier. All right, with this, we've come to the end of today's class. We say thank you once again for listening, and see you in our next class. Please read, review. Past persons will be coming on. Thank you very much. Bye bye.